right. Well, I am thrilled to be here this afternoon with Penny, who I met, gosh, quite a few years ago now. It must be sort of 4 or so years ago, when I was with my previous Social Enterprise Lively, and Penny was one of the members of that program, and also put her hand up to be part of our Brains Trust, which was a group of wonderful Lively members whose ideas we wanted to hear about the work that we were doing. And I remember very quickly being impressed by Penny's strong views on, what's working and not working around kind of aging
Yeah,
services. I've had many conversations since that time, and I always feel like I learn a lot about the experience of moving through older age that you're having when we talk. And so I'm
yeah,
really grateful to you for being willing to record one of those conversations, because I'm sure that others will take things too. Um, and so maybe just to kick us off, Penny, I'm wondering if you'd be happy to just share how old you are, and in whatever way it makes sense to answer this question, kind of where you feel that you're at in the sort of story and journey of your life and aging.
okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Anna. I'm 73. I retired 7 years ago, and I've been navigating this moving into retirement and how to live this stage of my life. And one of the things I found was that um, a lot of the services have been built around a particular narrative that I didn't fit into, basically. I am a single woman. I don't have any family around me. All my family are interstate. And a lot of my friends after COVID either left in a variety of ways. They left the state or passed away. And so my community became quite small. And so I found myself in a situation with a very narrow group of support networks around me. And it's continued to get smaller as we age. And so when I see some of the support networks around, they seem to assume some aspects, generally speaking, not everywhere, but generally speaking, that you're maybe a couple, you may have grandchildren or great grandchildren around you that are supporting you, and then they're just adding in some extra little bits and pieces. And it's very different when you're on your own. Um, so I sort of feel I'm in a particular stream, which I don't think is really clearly understood. And particularly when you go and have, as I've had, in and out of hospital for a lot of time the last couple of years, the notion that you have somebody home looking after you and the complete disbelief that you could possibly not have anybody that you could call on. The medical profession seems to be unable to comprehend that in some way, that there are people in this world who are alone at this time of their life and need a broader range of services. Now, there are those services around, but sometimes they are under-resourced, difficult to tap into. So that's what I've been finding. Yeah.
Mm.
Does that cover your question?
Yes, and it just gives me like 25 more to ask. And I'm trying to choose which one to go to next. I mean, I'm curious. I think sometimes there's an assumption that gets made that people who, I don't know what the assumption is exactly, but maybe certain views of the sorts of people who find themselves on their own, when they're very old, and, oh, that'll be somebody else. That's not me. And I'm just curious about, for you, I know that you've had a really rich professional life and a very full life. And I'm curious about whether that's something that, has taken you by surprise to start to find yourself feeling that way, or is that something that you saw coming?
I don't think you understand the impact of your early life decisions until you actually get to this stage. So thought about it, but it's had a greater impact. And I don't know how much of that was because of the pandemic or whether that just accelerated. I don't know whether it was already there and slowly becoming visible to us or to me, and that COVID accentuated that. From some of my friends that left, I think it accentuated some decision making to change their life and do different things. It's very hard to look back, but I did think my senior years would be a little bit different from what they are. Yeah, I'd have to say that. Yeah.
In what way?
And well, I almost, if I look back to, my 50s, I didn't think I would be a single woman at this time of my life, you know.
Mm.
Uh, Thought I'd be living this part of my life with a partner doing the things we love to do. And that hasn't eventuated. Yeah.
And I mean, there are quite a lot of women out there who are in that situation, as I understand,
Um,
women who've sort of found themselves newly single in their 50s for various reasons. And
yeah.
I'm aware of, a bit of a movement towards co-housing communities and a few that are very
Yeah.
specifically older women, kind of setting those up and
Mm.
deciding to live together and support each other. And I'm curious what your feeling about those sorts of models is.
I think it's wonderful actually that there are those models. If you can find the right community, if you can find a group of people with at least some shared interests that community would support. And I suppose I'm not your typical woman that's sort of at this age with children and grandchildren, and my conversation is around grandchildren, things like
Yeah.
that. My life has taken me in a different direction, and my son is living his best life, but there's no sense of grandchildren or anything on the horizon. And even if there were, I can't see myself as being one of those doting grandmothers that's becomes my world, photos and all that. It's not my world. So I think those co-communities are brilliant for those that have got at least some shared interests, and the different shared interests that are really well supported. And that's the key for me. I
Mm.
mean, it's not as easy to bring your community around you at this stage. It takes a lot of work when you don't have the energy to do that type of work.
Mm, mm. Yeah. You talked about, that not being your world. And I'm curious, like, how do you describe your world? Like, what's the stuff that gives you kind of passion and purpose? And
So, as you know, I've been getting involved in art, um, but my art's very different art. It's not what you're seeing behind me. This is my collection of cat paintings and prints from around the world. But my own art is non-objective, abstract, and it doesn't fall into the commercial range. So that actually puts me in a different stream again. I'm very interested in things like philosophy and European mythology, and I like to read a bit, and I don't know, and travel. They're the things that I'm interested in. Last year I went to Japan, and I know a lot of people going to Japan, but I went on a specific tour which it was just 10 days of art. That's all we did. We did nothing else but art, gallery after gallery out on the islands
mm,
where there's a big triennale, which happens every 3 years. So, yeah, and I met some people there. They were really nice, yeah, but not necessarily in my age group.
mm.
So, yes, so I've got different interests, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there go, yeah, I share those interests too. I haven't just discovered them all as yet.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I remember one of the first conversations that we had, you were raging about the menu of seniors activities and, why
Yeah.
it is that suddenly people turn 50 or, I mean, 50 is so young, but, like I've seen signs for this for over 50s, bingo
Yeah.
and whatever else, and just this very small range of activities. And I think you said at the time something like, where do I talk about philosophy with people?
Yeah, that's right. And I have been out and joining different groups, and I went and joined a group, and we studied for 2.5 years, and then I stepped aside. But I was the eldest one there, and I've made a couple of friends, but it's sort of they're a lot younger, which is great because that's one of the things that I crave is the different generations in my life.
Mm.
Yeah. So at that time when I did that rage, I just had not long before seen an ad or something about some residential were providing entertainment, which was people sitting around a piano singing one of the Andrews Sisters songs. I forgot which one it was. But I was thinking, um, that's not what I want to see around the piano. And I thought, well, that must be for the older end of the baby boomers that were in these residential cares. So the imagery on TV at that time was people sitting in single rooms doing crocheting or knitting or sitting around the piano playing songs that seemed to be from a lot older generation, um, or, going for little walks around the little garden. So I just thought it was such a narrow view of what our generation was about. And I've spoken to quite a few friends, and their response is, "Oh my God, I don't want to sing those songs. I want to sing, a Rolling Stones song or whatever their passion was, and I don't want to knit or crochet." And as I was saying before we started recording, I've noted that the marketing people have caught on to this notion that the younger baby boomers that are starting to look into retirement homes and so forth are a lot different, and they've got them dressed funky ways and jumping into sports cars and zooming around. So the marketing people have got it. I don't know if the homes and the support mechanisms around have got it. And it also ties into that trope that us baby boomers have all the money and can afford the sports car and go travelling and do this and do that. And that's not necessarily the case for everybody.
No. It seems to me that trope is becoming really pervasive at the moment, and it's really like this sense of kind of intergenerational sort of warfare and tension, and this real anti-boomer sentiment is
Oh,
it's really growing. And I notice it even in my social circles in recent years. It comes up, casual comments and throwaways about, oh, the boomers and all that sort of stuff, in a way that wasn't there, like even 5 years or so ago in my experience. And I think, yeah, as you say, this new image of the cashed up luxury old age lifestyle, it plays into that. And so I think it's troubling in terms of that intergenerational kind of conflict piece, but I think also then within the generation, it just kind of erases and obscures the reality of so many people's actual experience, and the fact that that is just
yeah,
not what it looks like for everybody. And there's a real class element in that. We don't talk about class
yeah.
much in Australia, but it is, there's a class thing there.
And it's part of this, when I say current, I suppose it's always been around, but it seems to be highlighted at the moment. There's this very much this separating into the them and us, you
Mm.
know, and it's around everything at the moment, from your financial status, your age, your background. And that's being driven a lot by certain aspects of the media, certain aspects of politicians.
Mm.
So, our age group is going to be impacted by that, because there is this, you're either part of this generation or that generation, and this generation did this to this generation. And it's part of that bigger picture of really pitting one part of society against the other part of society. And it's all pervasive. It's
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, it's interesting. It concerns me when it comes to, the rhetoric around the boomers. And it was interesting. I actually went and did a quick bit of research because I'm like, I'm curious about how much of, where's the fact in this and where is the distortion? And I know that one of the things that people really hone in on is home ownership and, the wealth that is held in housing. And interestingly, the boomer generation actually doesn't hold the most housing wealth out of, generations in Australian society. It's actually Gen X. But the boomers are positioned as the ones who are hoarding the houses and, making it impossible for young people to get into the market and all the rest. And so, of course, you know, there are little bits of truth in these things, but I think you and I were talking before about the fact that it also obscures the fact that When you look at people who are sitting in a home that they own at the age of 60, there are years and years and years of
Yeah.
work that's led to that point. And, as a
Yeah.
30-year-old, I can't look and go, oh, well, they're so much better off economically than me, poor me. I haven't had as much time to get there.
Yeah, and it is that looking at people at the same time period of in their lives, you and I comparing each other with our experiences has some validity, but not much because we have lived such diverse lives and such different lives. Yeah, I wish there were more people that were curious that would say, "You're lucky you've got a home. Tell me how you manage that."
Mm.
What did you have to do to get your own home? And, then they'll find out that I worked 2 jobs and I was paying 17.75% interest rate over many, many, many years. I thought it was Christmas when it finally dropped down to 13%
Yeah.
interest rate. I thought, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
I think it was before we were recording, my girlfriend and I sitting around talking about when we started out, we had mattresses on the floor and cardboard boxes for bedside tables. We didn't have TVs. We didn't have phones. If we wanted to make a phone call, we walked up to the phone box. If we wanted to watch TV, we went round to a friend's place who had one. So they're different experiences.
Yes. And, I also think what we forget and take for granted is a lot of the work that was done by people of the boomer generation and others, but, also the boomer generation on issues like gender equality and even in the environmental space,
Yeah.
real leaders in the 60s and 70s that, all of this further development
Yes.
has built on. And so I think I find it a bit disappointing, to be in a position where societally, where, yeah, pointing this damning finger at a group of people who have actually done a lot to help build a lot of the things that people take for granted
Yeah.
now. And it worries me because of, I guess, the impacts on ageism. We know ageism is already there and we're trying to sort of push
Yeah.
against it. And it just seems to sanction ageism, you know?
Yeah. And it goes a lot of ways, I think, as well. I mean, I think every generation gets projected on, including the younger generations. That there is some narrative around how they're being perceived these days. And for some of them, that will be true, but for many of them, it won't be. This projecting on and trying to delineate how they're different from me, from others, seems to be this narrative around the world at the moment. It seems to be a lot of talk about community and how important it is, but that seems to be drowned out by the screaming very loudly about excluding people that don't look like you. And so we've got these double narratives in society, which I think is making it very hard for anyone to navigate.
Yes. Yeah, which, yeah, as you were sort of saying before, really it feels like at this time what we need is all people of different ages and experiences and perspectives actually kind of coming together to help figure out a way
Yeah.
through a bunch of the challenges rather than, yeah, this sort of time arguing about who's got it better off. So I guess moving back or, zooming back in on you, and away from the from all the trials of the world and what needs to be done about that. I'm curious just from where you sit now and as you look ahead, what are the things that you feel hopeful about and what are the things that are challenging?
Um, Certainly for me at the moment, what's challenging is my health. And the notion that I am not going to ever be without pain again, and I'm not going to have a young, fit body that can bounce around. So I find that aspect challenging because while the body's aging and deteriorating, I'm fortunate, touch wood, that the brain's still relatively okay. So my brain's still saying you can climb that mountain, and the body's saying, sit down and take a cup of tea. So that's a challenge. It really is. And this links to something I was saying earlier about creating a community around me at this age, which is supportive, that I can rely on, and in a mutual way that we support each other. So that's a bit of a challenge for me. What am I hopeful about is some of the younger people that I've met, a couple through Lively, the previous organisation that you're involved in. I've had some fantastic conversations with some of those young people, and they give me great hope for the future. And I thoroughly enjoy being with them, and particularly those that are interested in sharing their stories and listening to mine. And I've been fortunate to have a couple of those around. And that gives me hope that there are these curious young people who are energetic and are getting out into the world and really want to make a difference, and really good thinking. So that gives me hope. It really does. And I sort of really love that intergenerational work that you were involved in. And it was what attracted me to provide that mentoring, which I get a lot more out of than I think I mentor. So
I'm sure that's not actually the case.
Look, I can tell you I'm very grateful that I live here in Australia and in Melbourne. We have wonderful medical facilities here, and I am incredibly grateful, and I realise how privileged I am to live in this place with such great medical people. So that's something I'm very grateful for, because, they've got a lot to deal with. I'm keeping them all well and informed.
I read something the other day which stood out to me. I was reading a book about eldership, and the guy who writes it, Stephen Jenkinson, the book's called Come of Age, and he's sort of older himself, and he talked about this idea of deepening through diminishment. And how the experience of like physical kind of decline and challenges that you are talking about can actually lead to a deepening of the spirit and the soul. And I'm not at that phase of life yet, and I'm really curious whether that resonates with you at all and your experience, or what your reflection on that would be.
Yeah, it's quite a profound statement, but it resonates with me. Yeah. It's a big question.
It is.
And because of my reading in philosophy at the moment, I'm into the Stoics, and part of what I'm learning for that is just taking each day as it comes. Really, when you get to this age, there's that old saying that you get 70, and then every day after that is a bonus, and just thinking of the abundance that you have as opposed to the scarcity that you don't. And that links into some of that generational dialogue that's going on around the world. Instead of looking at what others have, thinking about what you have, and what you have is enough now. So I've been doing a lot of thinking around that. And there's still a lot that you can contribute, but it may not be in such a public, overt, extroverted way. It's quiet reflections that you can share with people, the guidance you can give to your loved ones when things are difficult, that you can be that steady hand there. And sometimes the best advice you can give is a hug, just sort of saying, I'm here. And yeah, that's sort of what I'm feeling at the moment. Yeah. If you ask me in a couple of weeks' time, it might be a bit of a different answer.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And honestly, the thing that comes to mind for me as you're saying that is that that act of taking every day as it comes is something that I think for younger people is not that, like you live in a world where that's not what you're doing. It's always about like the future,
Mm,
what are you kind of working towards? And, there's always this kind of, yeah, striving towards or reaching for or living for a future rather than just sort of being where you are in the day. And I think that that's one of those kind of quiet insights that I think, being
mm,
around older people to be reminded of things like that. And yeah, even just for me having this conversation now, it's a nice reminder to actually
mm.
just be here in the day with everything that I have and everything that I have being enough. And it's true. Yeah, I think it's just like that in itself is that eldership thing, and like
Yeah.
why we need more of these conversations and connections across generations because young people, take from it in ways that, yeah, maybe not that dramatic, but just
Mm.
really important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much I'd like to say, but yeah, helping people, I think, to slow down and appreciate the moment is really important. But yeah, it's a very, very fast and busy world out there.
Yeah. As always seems to happen, and as I knew it would, I feel like I could, yeah, probably keep asking you a million more questions. And
A whole lot spinning in my mind
many
as
more
well.
things to
Yeah,
talk about. Maybe we'll have to do it again another day, have a
yeah.
follow up. But I'm so grateful to you for being willing to share your experiences and what things look like from where you sit in life at the moment.
Mm.
I've learned a lot, and I'm sure others will too listening. So thank you, Penny.
Yeah, you're most welcome. You're most welcome. It's been an interesting journey, and it's been wonderful to have some of those young people along the way. And I'm working with Cherry at the moment.
Yay.
She's my helper, and we've had some amazing conversations. So I've been amazingly grateful for those opportunities. So, yeah,
So good. So good. All right. Well, thank you, Penny.
thank you, and all the best,
Thank
and
you.
enjoy the rest of the day.